Greetings, thanks for watching. This is part 3 of finding your hip joints for finding your length. We're going to work a little bit further today with the pelvic clock, or start actually with the idea of the pelvic clock. So here's a clock. It is lying on the ground as your pelvis. Let me do it this way. Okay. So here's the pelvis, and here's the clock, and here's my pelvis. It's as if the clock is lying underneath you, right? So that means that the numbers face the ceiling. What we did last week, here's 6 at the bottom and 12, is we did this movement first, pushing the floor away, pulling the floor towards us. So we were moving between the 6 on the clock and the 12 on the clock. 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, yeah? Today we're going to move between 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, tipping towards the left hip, which would be 3 o'clock, and tipping towards the right hip, which is 9 o'clock. So we'll begin that after you take your baseline. So pause the video. You're going to do the same standing baseline that you did before. Standing weight shift, right, left, forward, back, step forward, step back, step forward, step back, step forward, step back. Just get a sense of your length, how you sense your hip joints, how you sense support from the floor, and then come join me, and you'll find a place on the floor for your feet. It feels the right place, not too far away, not too close, but just the right Goldilocks spot. So here we have 9 o'clock on the right sticky outy bone of the pelvis and 3 o'clock on the left. So now how would you slide or push the floor away only with your right foot, and what would that do? So just begin naively. Don't try to get the exercise right away, but just notice with this very beginning idea, this movement idea of pushing the floor away with only one foot, what happens? You'll notice you begin to move across your pelvis against the floor towards the left. So how far do you think you'd have to go to get to the number 3 on that clock? How far would that be? How far would you travel with your pelvis? And please keep your knees relatively still. You could move yourself to 3 o'clock like this easily, but that's a completely different movement that doesn't involve moving the pelvis on a stable leg. You'll understand what that means in a bit, but right now we're moving the pelvis and moving the pelvis over the hip joints while the leg bones, the socket of the leg bones, are actually stable and still. So how easy it is to travel over to the left, and how many points of contacts can you make? So instead of jumping over, see if you can gradually, so what was that, 7 points of contact? How many points of contact can you distinctly find for yourself? And if that's not available to you, don't push really hard and dry. Just notice it's easy to notice. That's a really important thing. Just notice what's easy to notice. You'll get better at it if you stay with what's easy. Really, no kidding. So now what would happen if we went the opposite direction? That means we would go over to the right by pushing the floor away with the left foot, and then back to center or the beginning. Starting place, and then from the starting place you slide or push the floor away underneath your left foot without letting your knee move, and you slowly guide or steer, actually steering your pelvis from your foot. and the foot moves to the knee, and the knee moves to the hip joint. And because of the force that's coming through the hip joint, your pelvis goes in this direction, versus when you push the floor away with both feet, your pelvis goes in a different direction. So one foot takes you to the side, the other foot takes you to the other side, so that we're going like this with the pelvis, this with the pelvis. It's very much like walking in place, except you're actually walking with your pelvis and your feet. Your feet aren't moving forward, your pelvis isn't moving forward, but you are stepping right and left, quote unquote, stepping right and left. Okay, great. So now let's become more complex with the movement. We're going to start in the center, go up to 12, come back to center, go out to 1, back to center 2, back to center 3, etc. Now watch yourself right now. Watch yourself get excited about something new. Am I going to be able to do it? This is going to be really hard. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to. Just take it easy and begin with what you know, which is press both feet, push the floor away, go to 12. You know what, let's go to 3 o'clock next. Let's not take it that small yet. So now push the floor away with your left foot. Go to 3 o'clock. Come back to center. Draw the floor towards you with both feet. Go to 6 o'clock. Push the floor away with your left foot. Go to 9 o'clock. Push the floor away with both. Go to 12. Right foot pushes the floor away. Go left to 3 o'clock. Draw the floor towards you. Move to 6 o'clock. Push the floor away with your left foot. Go to 9 o'clock. Push the floor away with both feet. So just continue on that cardinal pathway, north, east, south, and west, cardinal points of the clock, narrowing the space between your movements, your touches to the floor. And now the next time you go up to 12 o'clock, come back to the starting place and move out to 1 o'clock. It's going to be between 12 and 3, but slightly closer to 12. And I'd like you to put your finger on the front of the clock so that you're clear as to where you're aiming for with your pelvis and how much you're going to have to use of one leg and the other leg to get yourself there. Now put your finger on 2. Aim up there for 2 o'clock. You're not at 3. You're not at 1. Good. Now aim for 3 o'clock. You already know where that is. So the cardinal points use one foot, the other foot, or both feet in 2 different combinations. When you start to add the numbers between, you're using a combination of the clutch and the brake and the accelerator to move into that direction. So put your finger on 4 and then aim yourself for 4. Do that as many times as you're comfortable with. Then 5, aim yourself for 5. Back to center. 6 uses both feet. Aim to 7. Aim to 8. So in all of these variations, you are giving your femur a chance to have a very clear view of where it's pushing inside the hip joint. So your pelvis is moving in different vectors inside the hip joint so that it becomes very clear to you sensorially, this is my hip joint, 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 this is my hip joint. So, you know, a pool cue If you're playing pool, if this is a pool cue, there's chalk, and you always chalk the end of the cue. Well, what we're doing with our pelvis when we're lying on the ground is we're using the pelvis to chalk each hip joint by how we press, either straight down or down and to the right, or further down to the right, or up and to the right, or way straight up, or up and to the left. Each time we do that, we're pressing in a different vector in the hip joint. That clarifies the joint for our brains. It gives us the pelvic, the hip joint on our body map. Suddenly we have a map of that place when it was always just kind of this vague area. So take a rest on your back and sense your low back, sense the curve of your low back, the length of your low back, and then come up, and I'll talk you through the standing part again. So come up to standing. Find your feet, find the weight through your feet, whether you feel pulled down or pulled up. Shift your weight a little bit right and left. Slowly to the right foot. How does it feel to stand on the right foot? Slowly to the left. How does it feel to stand on the left? What's the difference? Right, left, as long and as it's interesting. Then forward and back slightly, not to the point that you lose your balance, but just forward, back, and then step forward with one foot and step back to the beginning place, forward and back, and then just stand and sense what you notice about your hip joints. We'll stop there, and we'll have one more lesson on finding the hip joints next week. Thanks for